There was a time when the Las Vegas Strip was the very pulse of America after dark, a place where fortunes could be made or utterly shattered in the blink of an eye. Imagine neon lights, so brilliant they literally blotted out the desert night sky. But if you were to walk those same streets today, you'd be met with a shocking silence, empty sidewalks, eerily quiet casinos, and entire mega resorts sitting half vacant, their grand lobbies echoing with nothingness. Now, this didn't just happen. According to a former casino CEO, you had neon lights reflecting off the hoods of gleaming limousines, high rollers stacking mountains of chips in smoke-filled rooms, and even the everyday workers could feel that kinetic energy of a city that refused to slow down. All of them completely sold on the idea that Vegas was invincible. But far from the public eye, behind closed doors, a few powerful figures were making decisions that would change the Strip forever. So what if this emptiness isn't a symptom of decline, but actually part of a master plan? What if the casino bosses themselves orchestrated this collapse? Tonight, we are pulling back the velvet curtain to expose the hidden truth of Las Vegas. The high-stakes financial games, the backroom insider deals, and the cold, ruthless strategy that left America's playground looking more like a ghost town. You're going to want to stick around because what we're about to reveal will permanently change the way you see Sin City. You see, Las Vegas was never intended to be just another city. It was built to defy the very concept of reality. A glittering oasis carved right out of the Nevada desert. A collision point for dreams, money, and pure excess. Back in the mid-20th century, the Strip became the undisputed crown jewel of American entertainment. We're talking about Rat Pack legends like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin packing theaters every single night. Elvis Presley was turning his sold-out shows into massive cultural events. And the casinos themselves blossomed into architectural marvels, palaces of light, sound, and a spectacle so grand, it promised that anything was possible. For decades, Vegas wasn't just a travel destination. It was a symbol of raw ambition. Americans flocked there to chase that life-changing jackpot, while tourists from Asia and Europe came to experience what they saw as the absolute pinnacle of luxury and freedom. The streets were electric, buzzing with life 24 hours a day. The whole scene was electric. You had neon lights just dancing across the polished limousines. And inside, the high rollers were stacking mountains of chips in smoke-filled rooms. But here's the thing. Even the regular working folks felt it, that constant buzz of a city that truly never slept. The business model was brilliantly simple and for a long time completely unstoppable. More visitors always meant more money. The casinos would lure you in with dirt cheap buffets, heavily discounted hotel rooms, and an endless list of perks just to get you inside. Because they all knew the secret. Once a tourist stepped through those doors, the house always won. Billions poured into the city every single year. Developers got locked in a frantic race to outdo each other, building colossal mega resorts that were part theme park, part entertainment complex, and part luxury mall. By the 1990s, Las Vegas had become the fastest growing city in America, attracting not just gamblers, but families, celebrities, and major corporations, all eager to host their conventions in this desert paradise. But hiding behind all that success was a dark, unspoken truth. Vegas thrived on illusion. The endless flashing lights and the free-flowing cocktails were a masterclass in distraction, designed to make you forget that every spin of the roulette wheel, every single pull of a slot machine, was mathematically engineered to bleed you dry. And yet, people came in droves, happy just to be part of the spectacle. This was the true genius of Las Vegas. It wasn't just selling gambling, it was selling hope. The hope that you could be the one to beat the odds. The hope that for one night, you could live a life that was larger than life. The hope that you could be someone else entirely, even if it was just until your flight home. But that golden era was built on a fragile foundation. It depended on constant growth, on a never-ending stream of tourists feeding the machine. For decades, the city just kept expanding, all based on the dangerous assumption that the demand would never, ever slow down. The Strip stretched longer, the casinos grew taller, and the jackpots got bigger. And as long as the planes kept landing, the system worked like a charm. By the early 2000s, Las Vegas was pulling in over 35 million visitors a year, generating billions in gambling revenue alone. The brand seemed untouchable. A true American empire built on chance. It was during this incredible height of success that Vegas cemented its own myth as a city that was completely immune to collapse. Economic downturns would hit other states hard, but Vegas always seemed to find a way to lure visitors back, whether with new attractions or blockbuster celebrity residencies. Or sometimes it was simply the promise of reinvention. It felt like nothing could possibly break the machine, or so the world thought. Because while all the outsiders saw was a neon empire that could never fail, the insiders were already whispering. They were saying that Vegas had grown too fast, too big, and had become far too dependent on a fragile stream of money that could simply dry up overnight. And they knew that when it did, the results would be catastrophic. The first signs of the decline didn't arrive with flashing alarms. It all began like a whisper, so quietly you could have almost missed it, like shadows creeping across the desert at dusk. The hotel occupancy rates, you see, they started to dip. Not by much at first, mind you. Just a handful of percentage points. But then the casino floors, places that once pulsed with an electric energy, began to show these strange, empty patches. And the tourists from overseas, especially from China and Canada, the very people who had been the financial backbone of the Strip, they just stopped showing up in the same numbers. Initially, the analysts all pointed to the usual culprit: inflation. The price of everything, from a plane ticket to a simple cocktail, was just soaring. A buffet that you remember costing $10 was now suddenly closer to $50. Hotels were tacking on hidden charges left and right, and that old magic of a cheap Vegas trip, it had vanished into thin air. For the average middle-class family, the city was no longer a bargain. It had become a financial trap. But rising costs could only explain a piece of this puzzle, because just beneath the surface, something far stranger was taking place. Some casinos seemed to be deliberately pulling back, scaling down their own operations. Entire sections of gaming floors were just quietly roped off. Restaurants began cutting their hours. Even the blockbuster shows, the ones that used to have audiences spilling into the aisles, would suddenly go dark, sometimes without a single word of explanation. Employees would whisper amongst themselves, talking about how management told them to keep quiet when guests asked why the hotels felt so empty. And the tourists? They felt that eerie silence, and they started to wonder out loud, had Vegas finally lost its shine? By 2024, the numbers were simply too stark to ignore. Visitor counts had taken a nosedive, and the Strip felt hollow in a way no one could ever remember. What was once a constant, vibrant hum of human energy was now broken up by long, deafening stretches of quiet. You'd hear taxi drivers complaining about the lack of fares. Uber drivers were just sitting idle for hours at McCarran Airport. And the street performers on the Strip, they suddenly had no one to perform for. The neon lights still glowed, but there were far fewer eyes left to see them. Now, for the casual observer, the explanation seemed pretty straightforward. The economy was hitting a rough patch, and people were naturally spending less money. But the insiders, they started hinting that something much deeper was at play. They spoke of an intentional slowdown, a strategy being orchestrated by the very casinos that were supposedly suffering from it. It sounded almost unbelievable. Why would billion-dollar resorts actively want fewer customers? And yet, the evidence was everywhere you looked. Instead of dropping their prices to lure visitors back, the casinos actually raised them. Instead of rolling out big promotions to fill all those empty rooms, they did the opposite. It started to look less like a business failing and more like a controlled demolition. This whole idea started to gain some serious traction when the whispers began to spill out from behind the Strip's velvet curtains. Dealers, pit bosses, even high-level hotel managers, they were all telling strikingly similar stories. The directive from the top wasn't to save Vegas, but to completely reshape it. We were told not to worry about the half-empty floors. One former employee finally admitted. The bosses just kept saying this was all part of the bigger picture, that we were all entering a new phase. The million-dollar question was, what phase? Economists poring over the data noticed that the casinos were acting completely against their own immediate interests. Usually, when a business is facing a drop in traffic, it slashes prices, it floods the market with deals, and it fights for every last customer. Las Vegas did the exact opposite. Prices skyrocketed, the perks and amenities dried up, and the whole city just became less welcoming. In essence, the Strip was bolting its own doors. It was as if the city was intentionally building walls around itself, carefully filtering who could still afford to get in and who would be left behind. And the tourists, of course, they felt completely betrayed. Social media was flooded with complaints from people who described paying luxury prices for what felt like a ghost town experience. "I paid $500 for a room and the place was a morgue," one reviewer wrote. "It just felt creepy, not glamorous at all." Others lamented that the energy, the very soul of Vegas, was simply gone. Without the throngs of people, without that constant electric buzz, the Strip felt like nothing more than an overbuilt desert highway lined with gigantic, lifeless hotels. And this stark contrast to the city's recent past made the emptiness feel all the more disturbing. You have to remember, just a few years earlier, Las Vegas had been on top of the world, riding a massive wave after the pandemic slump. Concert residencies from global superstars were packing the arenas every single night. International visitors were pouring back in. The convention centers were absolutely humming with business deals. The city had seemed unstoppable once again. So how on earth did it all unravel so quickly? The answer, according to those chilling whispers from the inside, was both simple and deeply unsettling. It didn't unravel at all. It was orchestrated. This decline wasn't a failure. It was a reset. It was a deliberate thinning of the crowd, a plan designed to fundamentally change the very identity of Las Vegas. Behind the deafening silence of the Strip lay a cold, calculated plan, and one former casino CEO was about to step into the light and confirm what many had suspected all along, that the emptiness was never an accident, but a calculated move, born in the highest echelons of power. And when that former casino CEO finally broke his silence, it sent a tremor right through the heart of the desert. You see, his name was once legendary, whispered in the same breath as one of the Strip's most famous resorts. This was a man who managed billions in revenue, booked the biggest stars, and whose vision literally changed the city's skyline. But after leaving his throne, he could only watch as the very industry he'd poured his life into began to eat itself from the inside out. He knew it was time to finally give voice to the rumors that had haunted the Strip for years. Vegas isn't empty by chance, he revealed in a private interview that immediately exploded into the public eye. "It's empty," he said, "because we wanted it to be." Now, at first, that sounds absolutely insane, right? I mean, why would these casino bosses, people whose entire empires are built on packed floors, intentionally drive those very crowds away? The answer, as he laid it out, was rooted in the cold, hard economics of the Strip. For decades, the casinos thrived on sheer volume. Millions of everyday people would come and spend just a little bit, but all those small amounts snowballed into unimaginable profits. But then, as costs soared and the global economy began to wobble, that old business model started to crack. The people at the top started asking a very different question. Why are we wasting our time chasing millions of minnows when we could just be hunting a few giant whales? According to this insider, the new game plan was brutally simple. First, you thin the herd. You price out the casual visitors and the weekend warriors. And in their place, you cultivate a whole new breed of customer. High rollers from tech, finance, and global hotspots who think nothing of dropping 6 figures in a single evening. By clearing out the everyday folks, the casinos were methodically transforming Vegas into an exclusive playground for the mega rich. The objective was never a full city, he admitted. The goal was to make it exclusive. But that was just one piece of the puzzle. The CEO then revealed another, even more cynical motive: consolidation. Think about it. When the tourist tide receded and the river of money dried up, the smaller operators, the ones who couldn't handle the drought, were left gasping for air, forced to sell. Suddenly, prime real estate on the Strip was available for pennies on the dollar, and the biggest casino empires were there to quietly buy it all up. What looked like a city in freefall was, in reality, a masterfully planned land grab. "We intentionally let the market collapse," the CEO confessed, "because we knew that when the dust settles, only the giants survive, and we planned on being the only ones left." But this was never just about buying up buildings. It was about seizing absolute power. By shrinking the customer base and becoming the gatekeepers, the big casinos could manipulate demand, jack up prices at will, and completely wipe out any competition that catered to the budget-conscious crowd. The CEO even confessed that some resorts deliberately cut back on services, not because they were losing money, but because they wanted to send a crystal clear message. If you can't afford to play in Vegas at its most expensive, then you simply don't belong here anymore. But perhaps the most shocking part was his description of how this whole scheme was tied directly to Wall Street. We're talking hedge funds and private equity firms. These financial puppeteers, he revealed, had been pushing this exact strategy for years. To them, Vegas wasn't a magical city of dreams. It was just another asset on a balance sheet to be stripped for parts, consolidated, and rebuilt for one thing and one thing only: maximum returns. The number of happy tourists meant nothing next to the stock price. They don't care about the magic of Vegas, he said flatly. They only care about quarterly earnings. And if fewer people mean higher profits, then an empty city is a profitable city. His words were a gut-wrenching confirmation of what so many employees had feared for years. That eerie, unsettling silence on the casino floors wasn't a sign of failure. It was the entire point. Every restaurant with its doors chained shut, every theater stage collecting dust, every unnaturally quiet night on the Strip was just another calculated step toward the future they envisioned. Not a vibrant carnival for everyone, but a sterile, curated theme park for the elite. A city where the price of admission was a 7-figure bank account. This revelation sent a tsunami crashing over the community. All those workers who had lost their jobs suddenly understood the devastating reason why. All those tourists who felt like the city didn't want them anymore realized they were right. They were never supposed to come back. And the locals, the people who grew up with the roar of the crowd as the city's heartbeat, were now faced with the bone-chilling truth that their home was being re-engineered into something they no longer recognized. "This isn't the city I helped build," the CEO admitted, a rare hint of regret in his voice. "We built this place on millions of ordinary people. Now it's being rebuilt for a select few. And when the lights do come back on, don't expect the same city you remember." The fallout from this corporate chess game has been absolutely catastrophic for the people who built their lives around Las Vegas. Entire neighborhoods that once buzzed with life, fueled by the endless stream of visitors, now sit half empty like modern ghost towns, with closed signs hanging on the doors of one small business after another. It was like a switch was flipped. One after another, the restaurants that once welcomed working-class folks and middle-income families watched their patrons simply disappear, almost in the blink of an eye. We're talking about cab drivers, cocktail servers, performers, and dealers. Tens of thousands of careers just gone. They were the casualties of a decision made in gleaming corporate boardrooms, a world away from the casino floors. For the people who actually lived in Las Vegas, this so-called reset wasn't about opportunity. It was a fast track to despair. And according to the local news reports, the reality was grim. By early 2024, unemployment in the service industry had absolutely skyrocketed, leaving workers with a terrible choice: leave town or take a minimum wage job miles from the Strip. Those iconic street performers, the ones who were the very heartbeat of Vegas's eccentric energy, are now playing to empty sidewalks that see only a fraction of the foot traffic they used to. The Strip, which once crackled with the energy of a never-ending carnival, now feels like an abandoned movie set. A beautiful, glittering backdrop with no actors in sight. And here's the most chilling part. For the powerful players orchestrating this, the emptiness was never a failure. It was the intended result. By choking the life out of the city, they engineered a crisis that gave them all the leverage. Businesses on the brink were forced to sell for rock-bottom prices, clearing the way for the largest conglomerates and outside investors to swoop in and feast. Entire casino empires, landmarks of the old Vegas, were simply swallowed whole by these mega corporations. This was a consolidation of power on a scale that would have been impossible during the city's boom years. The Strip, once a battlefield of fierce competition, was now the private property of a select few corporate giants. One former casino CEO even called it a controlled demolition. He said the whole idea was to tear down the old Vegas, not with explosives, but by dismantling its very economic structure, so it could be rebuilt into something else entirely. "You can't create exclusivity in a city built for the masses," he explained with cold clarity. So the masses had to be pushed out. The plan was undeniably brutal, but it was also brutally effective. Starve the ecosystem, let the weakest parts crumble, and then rebuild on the ashes. But this kind of exclusivity always comes at a cost. By redesigning a Vegas meant only for billionaires and international elites, the city is risking its very identity. The Las Vegas that lives in our collective memory, that wild weekend getaway, the bachelor party capital of the world, the one place where anyone could feel like a high roller for a night, that place is vanishing. In its stead is a gated playground for the few, a new version of the Strip where the average tourist is implicitly told they are no longer welcome. And the ripple effects of this are stretching far beyond Nevada. International travelers who used to pour in from Asia and Europe are now pointing their jets toward other destinations, frustrated by the sky-high costs and the soulless experience. The massive conventions that were once the backbone of the city's financial calendar are pulling out, as organizers admit they just can't convince enough people to pay these inflated prices. Even the high rollers themselves are starting to notice that without the buzzing crowds, without that electric energy, the Vegas experience feels hollow. The great irony is that in chasing after exclusivity, the casinos may have snuffed out the very magic that drew the elites to Vegas in the first place. And yet, the insiders remain unshakably confident. Financial analysts with deep ties to the industry keep insisting that the strategy is working perfectly. They point to casino conglomerates reporting stable profit margins despite having fewer customers, which is largely because they're extracting enormous sums of money from a smaller, far wealthier clientele. The stock prices for these major gaming corporations have held strong, propped up by investors who see this new Vegas as leaner, more efficient, and ultimately more profitable. As one Wall Street report bluntly put it, fewer guests, higher spend per capita. Vegas is evolving, not collapsing. For the ordinary people of Nevada, however, that evolution feels like a profound betrayal. Community leaders are sounding the alarm, warning that the city is being hollowed out, becoming nothing more than a corporate shell completely disconnected from its people. Activists point to the rising homelessness and shrinking wages and the loss of its cultural soul as hard evidence that this strategy is killing more than just businesses. It's killing the very spirit of the city. They say they're saving Vegas, one local resident told a reporter, their voice thick with bitterness. But what they're saving doesn't look anything like the Vegas we knew. And that is the haunting reality of this situation. The emptiness on the Strip isn't a temporary slump. It is the blueprint. And just as that former CEO admitted, the long-term goal is nothing short of a complete metamorphosis of Las Vegas into a luxury enclave. A bold experiment in turning America's most accessible playground into one of its most exclusive fortresses. So the question we're left with isn't whether Vegas will bounce back, it's whether ordinary people will ever be allowed back in at all. Because behind the glowing lights and empty halls of Las Vegas, a different game is being played. But beneath that veneer of exclusivity lies a truth that's far more sinister. The former casino CEO laid it all out. What we're all seeing. The eerie silence. The vacant hotel towers. The restaurants with their doors bolted shut. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath it all, he said, is a tangled web of money, politics, and secrecy that goes way beyond the borders of Nevada. They don't just want to rebuild Vegas, he warned. They want to control it. And this emptiness? It's the perfect cover. According to those on the inside, one of the dirty little secrets of an empty Vegas is that it makes cooking the books a whole lot easier. With fewer customers milling about, there are fewer eyes on the money. The drop in foot traffic gives them the perfect excuse for some creative accounting, for secretly funneling money through shell corporations, and for shuffling funds across the globe without setting off any alarms. Now, investigators have suspected for years that casinos are the perfect machines for laundering money, but the silence blanketing the Strip makes that trail of dirty money even harder to follow. And as the CEO laid it all out, the real secret was the quiet moments. When the floors empty out, nobody's watching the count. That's your window to slide millions right through the system and not a single soul would ever be the wiser. And you can bet Wall Street's fingerprints are all over this story. Private equity firms, the kind that used to ignore the day-to-day grind of the gambling world, suddenly smelled blood in the water during the downturn. With the number of visitors plummeting, they had the leverage to demand a complete and total restructuring. Casino executives, feeling the intense pressure from these new investors, started putting balance sheets ahead of actual people. To these firms, the emptiness of Las Vegas wasn't a crisis at all. It was a golden opportunity, a chance to gut their operations, slash labor costs, and focus only on the super rich elites who deliver those massive returns. And then, things get international. The CEO hinted at some very shadowy partnerships with investors from overseas, specifically the kind looking for quiet, discreet ways to park their cash in the United States. Suddenly, these high-end casinos, conveniently cleared of everyday tourists, became the ideal front for hiding massive transactions in plain sight. Billionaires could wire in a fortune, lose it all at the tables, and then walk away with perfectly clean money. Regulators might ask a few questions, but with Vegas so obviously hurting, the cover story was already written for them. The emptiness became the ultimate smokescreen. But even more disturbing were the whispers of political players being in on the scheme. The CEO claimed that state officials knew exactly what was happening to the city and simply let it unfold. Why would they do that? Because they were getting a piece of the action too. Think about it. Tax money from a small handful of corporate giants is way easier to manage than the income from dozens of smaller businesses. Lobbyists dangled campaign support, and just like that, no one in power seemed to care why Las Vegas was turning into a ghost town. The silence wasn't just on the casino floors, he said. It was in the government offices too. What makes this whole revelation so chilling is that the strategy is bigger than just economics. It's about seizing control by engineering scarcity. Fewer rooms, fewer seats at the shows, fewer tickets to anything. The casinos are creating this illusion of an ultra-exclusive club. This way, they can dictate exactly who gets in, what they'll pay, and who makes the rules. And once they have that kind of power, they can completely reshape the very soul of Las Vegas. What was once known as America's playground is slowly being twisted into something that feels more like a private country club for the global elite. But here's the part they really don't want you to know. This emptiness isn't just a phase. According to the CEO, there is no grand plan to bring the masses back. In fact, the long-term vision is to make sure people like you and me never come back. The new resorts are all being designed with luxury suites, private gaming parlors, and VIP-only entertainment. The developers are openly wooing foreign billionaires, celebrities, and tech titans, not families from Kansas or couples celebrating an anniversary from Ohio. For the average visitor, Las Vegas is being deliberately priced out of reach. And as the strip gets quieter, the power pulling the strings only gets louder. Hedge funds, foreign investors, and corporate giants are actively remaking the city into a global financial hub that's just disguised as a fun destination. The neon is still there, sure, but it's not for you anymore. It's just a stage light for the real show, the transactions, the distractions, while fortunes move like ghosts through the system. And maybe the most unsettling question is whether Las Vegas is just the beginning. If the most famously over-the-top city in America can be hollowed out from the inside and turned into a private machine for the ultra-rich, then what other cities could be next on the list? If a place that was built on being open and spectacular for everyone can be repurposed for secrecy and control, then how safe are any of America's cultural landmarks from the very same blueprint? The former CEO left his audience with a single, haunting sentence. "Vegas didn't collapse," he said. "It was emptied." And once you see who's pulling the strings, it all clicks. This was never about a roll of the dice, it was always about control. Las Vegas, you see, has forever been a master of illusion. A city built on the magic of its neon glow, the symphony of its slot machines, and the endless rivers of champagne. Every single detail was meticulously crafted to make you believe in the impossible. But what happens when the grandest trick of them all is finally laid bare? That haunting emptiness on the strip? That wasn't some unfortunate accident. It was a masterpiece of design, engineered, calculated, and executed with chilling precision by the very people who had the most to gain. Then, a former casino CEO decided to shatter the silence, and his confession rips the curtain away, exposing the dark underbelly of what Sin City has truly become. The city that once held the promise of opportunity for anyone with a dream has been hijacked, remolded into an exclusive playground for a select few. Its workers cast aside, the tourists shut out, and the small businesses that were its lifeblood utterly crushed to serve a much larger, more sinister vision. A vision of a Vegas that no longer belongs to America, but to a shadowy global elite. And behind the velvet rope of every darkened theater, behind every silent casino floor, lies a story they never wanted told. A story of raw, unchecked power, of dirty money, insatiable corporate greed, and backroom political deals. And it forces you to wonder, if they can hollow out a city as legendary as Las Vegas, What's to stop them from coming for yours next? So as those famous lights continue to shimmer on the Strip, ask yourself this simple question. Are they shining to welcome you, or are they shining to hide someone else in the shadows? The truth, whispered by the very architects of this empire, suggests a chilling answer. Vegas isn't dead. No, it's been stolen, masterfully reshaped, and is now hiding right out in the open. Which leaves us with the ultimate question. Will the American people ever fight to take it back? Or has the final chapter for the City of Dreams already been permanently rewritten by someone else?